Governments are no longer denying it. The military are no longer denying it. And even mainstream media no longer denies it. They're here and have been here for a very long time. The Mutual UFO Network has been on the front lines uncovering the truth since 1969. And now we're sharing the truth with you. Welcome to MUFON's What's Up with hosts Katie Grabowski, Christopher DePerno, and Katie Cook, exclusively on the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. Wondering what's up? So are we.
What's up? It is Tuesday night, and you're listening to MUFON What's Up Radio, that show that says discovery starts with curiosity, and curiosity starts with MUFON. Brought to you by KGRADB.com. Make sure you like and subscribe. And now you can find us on Facebook. We have a What's Up page. So look for us on MUFON What's Up Facebook and subscribe to that as well. I'm your host, Katie Grabowski, Colorado State Director. And as always, we are endorsed by MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. We've been on the front line since 1969, always asking that important question, are we alone in the universe? I hope you all have had a good weekend. I know things are tough out there. I want to just take a few moments and just send some love and light to all the people in the Ukraine. It's been rough and hard, I know. And so just my thoughts are with them all the time. Boy, you know, I don't take anything for granted. Anyway, okay. So I want to remind all of you too to please register for the symposium in Denver. I also want to share that on Friday at the symposium, we have our special event. It's at the United States Air Force Academy. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have a private guided tour. They have a wonderful visitor center. We're going to have lunch on the grounds. If you haven't been there, it's just a beautiful location. They have a great museum and a film that we'll see, and it'll be a great day. So I hope you sign up for that special event on the Friday. I believe the ticket is $65, and you can, when you go to register, it's like an add-on for that. So, but boy, do we have a great show for you tonight. We have our special guest, Thom Reed. But before we bring him in, I want to introduce my awesome co-host. We have Katie Cook. You see her on Country Music Television, and she is interested in all things UFO and paranormal. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. Glad to be here again for another week. And thank you for those words. Like you said, don't take anything for granted. I've really been feeling that this week. I know everybody has. And
I know.
We're going to have a good time tonight. This is going to be a nice little break from some very serious news going on.
That's absolutely right. And I'd like to welcome New York State Director, and he is also on the ERT, Mr. Chris DePerno. Welcome, Chris.
Oh, hi, everybody. Helping me tonight is my friend Jerry the alien. He'll be helping me with doing a few things during the show. Say hello, Jerry. All right, enough with it.
Hello, Jerry. Hello.
Hey, Jerry. So, Katie, what do you have to kick us off tonight?
Well, you know, I always like to kick it off with a meme. So let's start with that.
Oh, no.
That old pesky face hugger from Alien giving out free hugs. Don't fall for it, my friend. And our paranormal pop of the week, you know, we're gearing up for St. Patrick's Day. And look how cute this little guy is. Oh my gosh, how cute is he? Little shamrock alien. Look, he's got his little kilt on.
Why don't we have an Italian one?
Wait,
I gotta talk to Wendy. I need an Italian paranormal pop.
We could work on that. I think we have a picture of that too. Yeah, look, you get a better look at him. Look at his little kilt. And you know, speaking of kilts, Outlander's coming back soon. Okay, just saying, I'm a little excited about that. And as always, you can order these pops at paranormalpops.com. And I think if you order these in the next week, you'd get them in time for St. Patrick's. So definitely check that out. And look what I found, a cute little UFO clutch. I'm in love with this. You could use it as a coin purse, a makeup bag. I found this on Etsy. It's sold by Needle Gnome Studio on Etsy. I just love that. I think that's so cute.
It's kind of classic.
Yeah, with the little abduction going on, the little alien in the background behind
I
the
don't
Yeah,
like
great.
that it's like a tent. I'm gonna go camping this weekend, and I'm like, a lot of weird stuff has been going on this week. I'm a little nervous, so I'm like, oh no, if I don't come back for next week's show, I got sucked into like a portal or
I
something.
think I'll get my wife one of those for her birthday.
Okay. I see. I love how I find all these gifts for your wife. You're into that one. Half the time I show stuff and you're like, no, she wouldn't like that. But maybe she'd like that one. You know
Yeah.
what? She'll love it if you put a whole bunch of money in it. I think that's like the
Credit
key.
card.
Probably divorce papers would be happier, but what do I know?
Moving right along. Okay. Chris, normally at this point I'd say, what have you got for UFO news? But you actually have something else really cool to share.
Yes, I do. I want to take this time because I've been devoted to the school children of the United States. And I developed the programs for school children to learn about aliens. I think it's very important that we need for them to understand the universe and to understand the idea that there's life out there. So, with my friend Jerry the alien here, I have developed a program called CAT, C-A-T, Critical Alien Theory. And I'm working on this. And so, what I decided to do to test the program with my granddaughter, because I want her to learn at a young age to become a famous ufologist. So, I made a little video of that. Amanda, would you roll that one with Charlie? Hi, honey. Today we're going to learn all about aliens. This is Jerry the alien. Now, you notice Jerry has a big head and he's got big almond eyes. And look, hey, he's got no nose and he's got very small lips. He's really, really a small guy that we call gray. Yeah, he's a little green right here, but he's really gray and stuff. Jerry's going to teach us about life all over the universe. So, what do you think about Jerry the alien, honey?
I was not expecting.
I was not prepared.
What? I'm teaching my granddaughter about aliens. What?
Normally, I watch some of these before. Oh
Hey,
my
if you saw an alien, wouldn't you crap your pants?
Oh my God.
That's
Oh my
funny.
God. You know, I think we need to put aside a little therapy fund for the granddaughter. Let's go ahead and start it now. Oh my God, that's so good. That's so
funny.
good.
That's funny, Chris.
That's so
Gotta
good.
start
Chris.
early. Gotta start early in life.
Oh, all right. Well, from farts to what's going on in the news this week.
All right, let's start with our Amanda. Let's start with our first headline here. Edward Snowden says UFOs come from ultra-terrestrial civilization in the Earth's mantle. I can't keep up with this. Ultra-terrestrial, extraterrestrial, interdimensional. I don't know. But Edward Snowden reported on facts known concerning UFOs according to documents which Snowden copied from the CIA. The government has long known that UFOs exist and are a species more advanced than humanity. If you look at the world right now, my dog Stewie is more advanced than anybody over there. I can tell you that right now. So that's not saying a whole lot. But Snowden says that these species are not alien. They live here for billions of years and are far ahead of us in development. The CIA stores secret data tracking systems and deep sea sonar. I always thought sonar was in the sea, but what do I know? But the information is kept secret, and even scientists do not have access to this data about who's living there in the Earth's mantle. This is the only place where conditions were stable for billions of years. Obviously, they never heard of volcanoes. But this civilization can live at different temperatures and have been able to flourish and develop at an accelerated pace. Their living conditions in Earth's mantle defended their civilization for many disasters that have occurred on the surface of the Earth. The theory is that we're just ants from their point of view, and that there is a small chance they will not continue to pay attention to us. But the military has considered the possibility of aggression, and the current plan of action in emergencies include a plan to detonate a nuclear weapon in the deep caves to seal the enemy in the hope of destroying their communications that will prevent further attacks from the bowels of the Earth. Amanda, will you roll that video, please?
The Canadian newspaper Very Seriously Weekly World News was published February 14th. 1995, an article which proves again the theory of the hollow Earth. This is the title of the article: Cape Canaveral, Florida, NASA receives radio signals coming from inside the Earth. Experts believe that these signals are emitted by a form of intelligent life and well developed. A senior NASA does not speak its name says in the article that are underground creatures who seek to enter into communication with us. Whoever they are, he said, they have a technology that is capable of sending signals through the Earth's crust, hundreds of miles of earth and rock. Scientists have seen the first signs October 30, 1994, thanks to satellites very sensitive. Since then, emissions have been renewed at regular intervals, said the head of NASA. The radio signals are composed of a very complex mathematical code, which has convinced us that we were in contact with a colony of living beings whose intelligence is undoubtedly superior to ours. He explained that scientists have not been too difficult to decipher the messages, but he repeatedly refused to disclose what they contain. I would not say that the messages are hostile nature, but their content could cause controversy and concern, says he. Like many other things depend on the interpretation, I would wait before declaring anything that could put the public in a state of excitement and anxiety. The informant went on to explain that NASA's scientists are frustrated by the fact that they were unable to locate this underground civilization, and they are not able, with the technology they have, respond to messages. They know more about us than we do about them. They found a way to communicate with us regularly and we Bicons, do not themselves know how to reach them. Their messages show that they have extensive knowledge about life on the surface of the Earth, as we have no explanation on the possibility of development and survival of intelligent life devoid of oxygen and sun, but for now, everyone continues to lie, including the head of NASA quoted in the article, affirming that we have no way to communicate with this culture. Other sources say, however, that these beings are trying instead for a long time to understand our leaders, that the armament and nuclear energy can express our loss, implying that trade has taken place and that if they had the opportunity, people of the hollow Earth would not be content with a one-way communication. What are the requirements contained in these messages that push NASA to refuse to speak? Since messages do not seem hostile, they cannot put seriously at risk. It is therefore once again the political and economic forces that feel threatened and impose its veto on the dissemination of information.
I don't know. Ultra-terrestrial, extraterrestrial, dig a hole, I don't know. Cookie, what do you think?
It's weird. We spend so much money and we're just so obsessed with getting out into space, but we really still don't know everything about our own planet, which is mind-blowing. But I go back and forth on the whole hollow Earth thing, because part of me is just like, where? How could anything survive down there? I mean, I don't know. And it really bums me out to think that we would even consider trying to seal them down there, with nuclear weaponry. It's just like, what is wrong with us?
You think that would work? These people are so much more advanced to us. They look at us. Yeah, look what the ants are trying to do.
Yeah, I don't know.
Katie, what do you think?
I believe the NASA lying part. I'm not a big hollow Earth believer. I don't know. I'm with Katie. I don't know. I have the door cracked open, maybe, but it's just a sliver.
Well, whether it's true or not, hopefully you people decide. All right, let's get to our next story here, Amanda. Scientists capture video of 800-foot UFO traveling at 48,000 miles per hour. I got to see the camera that did that. Frederick Portugal, whatever his name is, we'll just call him Fred, a former U.S. Air Force and Boeing engineer, has captured pictures of an 800-foot object traveling at tremendous speed, close to 48,000 miles per hour. He claims to have captured an incredibly large UFO using a specialized telescope. How did Fred manage to capture it? By using technology known as hyperspectral remote sensing. It's a method being researched by scientists for the detection and identification of mineral, plants, and man-made materials, and now UFOs. Fred has a message for the world. He is certain they've entered our world through a gateway or a wormhole. a wormhole transportation technology that is seen, and plasma-like technology is being used to travel. Fred captured plasma-like objects flying at speeds beyond comprehension near Albuquerque, New Mexico. Of course, there they don't have speed limits. According to Fred, the Defense Department has created special binoculars, which they refer to as alien hunting binoculars. The technology is based on Frederick's personal telescope at the cost of $750,000 in the Air Force Research Lab. For $750,000, I better be able to see Jesus with those things. I can tell you that. Holy crap. The intense energy packed in one of these visible locations appears to be a highly illuminated ball and orb. Fred said, once we get through the plasma, we can build a picture of the shapes of UFOs. According to Frederick, this is absolute proof that aliens are here. All right, Amanda, let's roll that video.
U.S. Air Force scientist. Giant alien ships enter our world through the portal. A world-renowned scientist and former engineer of the United States Air Force and Boeing Company, using a telescope, photographed a UFO with a diameter of 250 meters flying at a speed of 48,000 kilometers per hour. But this is just one of the huge UFOs, of which many more have been recorded. According to Frederick Portugal, this is absolute proof that the aliens are already here. This data has been confirmed as authentic by the U.S. National Air and Space Intelligence Agency, NASA. Frederick Portugal, a former U.S. Air Force and Boeing engineer, captured UFO images and data with a hyperspectral imaging telescope. Portugal has a message for our world. Giant alien ships are entering the Earth through the portal. According to former Boeing chief engineer, aliens are using wormhole penetration technology to move these plasma-like UFOs near the Earth's surface at a speed of 48,000 kilometers per hour. Portugal telescopic footage captured the astonishing appearances of plasma-like objects flying at inconceivable speeds in the vicinity of the Petroglyph National Monument near Albuquerque, New Mexico. The military and the government have all the information, and they themselves are now watching the ongoing expansion of aliens on Earth. They have all this data, which proves that giant motherships are infiltrating into our world, with smaller ships on board and that leave the motherships and stay here, and the motherships leave and return with new cargo. This has been happening since at least 2008, when we first recorded their appearance. According to Portugal, the Department of Defense has created a special hyperspectral telescope, which they call binoculars for hunting aliens. The technology is based on Frederick's personal telescope and was refined with $750,000 from the Air Force Research Laboratory. The video recording begins with a concentration on the white sphere. Such luminous balls are very often observed by many eyewitnesses of the appearance of UFOs in our sky, but they do not see what is hidden behind this plasma screen. Simply put, intense energy gathered in one visible location looks like a highly illuminated ball to the naked eye. Once Frederick's sensor is able to analyze the plasma and estimate the volume of gases, it can build a picture of the object hidden behind the plasma envelope, showing the true outlines of the pyramids and various other shapes of UFOs that were dropped by the large mothership.
Hey, what do you think? You think he's got a great Kodak that he can take these pictures?
Did you say Katie or Cookie?
Katie.
Oh, I think that we were talking about this at the state director meeting last night, kind of those balls of energy and the plasma, and maybe you can't see what's behind it. So that kind of came up last night. So I know there's people looking into this. $750,000. I'm not going to be, using that equipment, but hey, I'll be in Albuquerque in a week and a half. I should go find those petroglyphs and maybe I'll again get sucked into some sort of, I don't know.
Don't leave us, Katie. Don't leave us. Yeah, I want some alien hunting binoculars. They sound pretty cool. But yeah, $750,000 is probably not on my Christmas list. So they're suggesting that the plasma is a protective screen.
Yeah.
In a way, I guess.
I will tell you, for $750,000, that's a pretty expensive way to see aliens.
It certainly is.
Go ahead.
I feel like the plasma thing is coming up a lot all of a sudden.
Yeah. Right. It would have to be big. I mean, it would have to be a big, huge orb. And a lot of those seem like they're smaller. So I don't know. Right.
Well, he's a credible scientist. Maybe he just went off his rocker. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it could happen. He's seen too many plasma balls and you know, things get a little screwy. But anyways, that's the news for this week, folks.
Thank you. That's some good news.
That's
good
good
old
news.
Fred. Yeah, we like that. Okay, KDG, case of the week.
Yeah, I have a good case of the week this week. It's case number 120608. It occurred January 18th, 2022, 3:10 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. This is a Colorado case, but it was closed as an unknown UAV. And I'll just read you the little deposition and show you a few photographs. And then I have a recording of the field investigator to add some unusual information that kind of went along with this case. So this is a gentleman, the witness. He set up a game camera in his backyard because he had a husky, and the dog was acting differently outside. On the first day, the camera took 3 pictures. The first with an oval craft in the air and one on the ground. Oh yeah, there we could see. So there you go. You could see that. I looked at the first picture with the crafts. The second just showed field, and the third showed something right up to the camera at point blank range. It looked like the inside of a craft with a white bald head in front and another behind, like in a fighter jet. The camera is only 4.5 feet above the ground. So Amanda, do you want to show that second photo? Yeah, like that white bald head. And at first I thought that was like a possible ET hand, but she said the camera, that lump above the head is actually the mountain range. So it's like somebody tilted the camera and they were able to line up the mountain range behind it. This is like, I think on 180 acres out there. The witness just moved out there in December. So the FI said the witness was down to earth and detailed in his communication. He appeared to be credible. These objects do not have the property of drones. And you can show the like close-ups too while I'm talking here. These objects do not have the properties of drones. These objects were not aircraft, as they did not resemble any known helicopters or airplanes. They did not resemble lanterns. They were not balloons. They didn't, as they had angles like walnuts, and there were no strings coming down. The photo of both objects were crystal clear, which indicates that they were stationary with no movement. And they seem to have like this weird energy around it. Talk about plasma, kind of that circle around that. The wind was blowing at 3 miles an hour to the northwest. And based on her research, she was over 90% certain that the objects were not any known aerial vehicles. So if you want to roll the video of our field investigator that actually worked the case, because there's some additional information. Thanks, Amanda.
My name is Anniversary Feinstein. I'm a field investigator for Colorado. I'm a CAG domestically and internationally. I'm an assistant state director for South Dakota, and I'm a member of the ERT, which is the Experiencer Resource Team. And I worked a Colorado case recently with an individual who lives in Eckerd, Colorado. And the case, Katie has all the specifics on the case, but I'll add a couple things. Outside of the fact that the pictures themselves were very clear and obviously of an unknown object, 2 objects, in fact, because one was on the ground and one was in the air. The witness had set up a game cam because he had a 6-year-old husky. And that husky all of a sudden didn't want to go outside and was acting very strange. So he set up this camera to see what was going on. He thought at first it might be mountain lions because they're in that area. But that was when he got these pictures on his cam. But not only that, the dog the following day wasn't able to get out of its bed in the morning, could not go down the stairs. And so he took him to the vet. And the vet did a blood scan on him, checked him over, and discovered puncture wounds on the outside of both front shoulders and the outsides of both of his rear legs. And at first, he wasn't sure if maybe there was an infection or something like that. So he actually shaved off his winter skin and looked at him, and there was no pus or anything like that. So he couldn't understand what in the world was happening. And so he did another blood test to see if the dog maybe had cancer, which the dog came out clean. They could find nothing wrong. And the vet said that this was nothing like anything he'd ever seen. But I guess there are records on that. And also, a number of days the following week, he put that camera back up because of what he caught on the camera, trying to figure out what was going on, and left it. And on Wednesdays, he and his wife normally have those days off. And it turned out that the camera picked up a large orb right in front of the camera on that Wednesday morning around 4 o'clock in the morning that they had off. And both he and his wife never get ill. And the both of them were so ill they couldn't get out of bed. The wife, I think, tried to walk to the kitchen and passed out on the way. So they were in bed all day, and the witness seemed to think that it might be connected to that orb. And another unusual thing was the fact that normally with a game cam, during the day, the game camera is going to photograph things in color. And at night, it will automatically switch to monochrome. And this particular camera took a picture of, with the first set of pictures, what looked like the top of a being's head, with the camera tilted at like a 45-degree angle and an orb behind this being's head. And it was in monochrome, but it was taken during the day. And so possibly something with the energy of whatever was right in front of the camera caused that, but it was not something that's normal. So I guess that's all the extra news on it, but it's a phenomenal case. And I do know at a later date that the witness also witnessed with his own eyes an object up against the mountains off the back of his property. And we requested that if he were to see anything else, to let us know, and then possibly we could go out there and take a look at the site itself. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Okay. They need
What
to
do
be
you guys think?
careful. Well, I just think if they go out there, they need to be careful. I don't know if it's radiation or what, but you know, they've all had some pretty serious side effects. Investigators do need to be careful. Right?
Yeah, I agree. I would take a Geiger counter out there, check the radiation levels. But also, it's interesting the shape of that object that was there.
Yeah.
It's very small. You know,
Mhm.
even for like a little gray who's like 3 feet. I mean, he's got to be really crunched in that thing.
Right.
And yet-
I mean, that's like putting me in a Mazda Miata. That's like putting a 10-pound ham in a
Right.
5-pound can. It just doesn't,
What
I
was
mean,
that old movie? There was an old movie like back in the 80s, and they had all these little UFOs flying around. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it reminds me of that sort of. I can't
You do
remember
hear
the
that
name
a
of it.
lot. Deb Jordan says in her case, like she saw all these little beings and she's like, how would they fit in that little
Fit
craft
in.
that landed in her yard? That happens a lot. It's really weird.
That is strange. That
Yeah,
is
they're probably
strange.
on the keto diet to keep their weight down because they're skinny little guys, I mean, and stuff. But if you think about the size of that craft,
Yeah.
I mean, you're certainly not going to get abducted because your legs would be sticking out the window of that thing. So I mean, you don't have to worry about that. But what you do, I mean, seriously, look at the
Kicking
size
out a
of that
window.
thing.
Let me
Oh,
out.
So it's like a 2-seater. You and Charlie are boom, away you go. We'll just go visit the Earth.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not a mothercraft, I can tell you that.
Right.
Where are you going to
Well,
put the examination table in that thing?
The dog with the things out of the dog reminded me of Sev Talk we had last week. She had the cross and that. So who knows what happened to the dog? I don't know. So anyway, Chris, did you catch up with Bob this week?
I did catch up with Bob, and he said a very interesting. You know what, Bob? I'm a little upset with Bob. Bob won't tell me the disposition. He says he's still working on it. But go ahead, Amanda. Let's roll that tape.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bob Spearing, and I am MUFON's Director of Investigations on the international side. Every week, Chris lets me bring you different videos from around the world, but I'd like to start today by talking a little bit about the symposium coming up in Denver in July. We have a presentation called Cases of Interest. And some of these cases may be solved, some of them may be unknown, some of them may just be interesting for different reasons. The case I'd like to play for you today is video from Ohio from December of two people driving along in a car, and they see anomalous looking lights. And with that, we're going to play the video.
UFOs. Oh my God. Oh my God. Look at that. Oh my God.
Now, these are quite impressive looking videos of two orange sets of lights going across the sky. Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to tell you about our investigation or the results we may have come to a conclusion about. If you'd like to know, you're just going to have to look forward to our symposium in Denver this July 8th. And with that, back to you, Chris. Thank you for letting me share. This is Bob Spearing signing off.
What a tease.
Tease.
Oh, man.
Don't
That
like
was
that at
pretty
all.
good footage, though, I have to say.
Yeah,
I didn't see
Yeah.
any blinking lights.
Yeah,
It was
for
cool.
once we got something that's not a freaking balloon, and he won't tell me what it is.
I know, right? It does look a lot like those lights that are over sports fields, like football fields at night. But if they were moving across the sky, well, it's kind of different.
As the video went, it got more interesting as they separated, and then it kind of has these longer lights. I don't know.
Well, he said he would announce. He's still working on it. He said he would announce the findings at the MUFON symposium. So,
Okay, well, everybody needs to go out there now and see. Bob's a really good field investigator. I know he debunks a lot for us, but that's important because when it's unknown, then it's truly an unknown. So I really actually like that. And I actually wanted to recognize some of our new field investigators that came into MUFON. So Amanda, can you roll that video, please? I would like to take a few moments to welcome aboard MUFON's new field investigators, as well as to recognize MUFON's appointees. First, we have new field investigators Richard Smedley out of Oklahoma, Zachariah Roseman out of Florida, Eric Marison out of Florida, Adam Smith out of Ohio, David Rapana out of Washington, John Genoa out of Vermont, Cody Stone out of Florida, Dr. C. M. Chantel from California, Mark William Dickey III out of Louisiana, Nicholas Yangus out of Tennessee, Nicholas Roslin out of France, Santosh Dandid out of India, Steve Marriott out of United Kingdom, and David Burton out of Canada. Congratulations to all of you new field investigators. Field investigation is the heart of MUFON, so I want to thank all of our field investigators out there, both old and new, for all your hard work and dedication and the work you put into the cases that come into CMS. I would also like to recognize MUFON's new appointees. We have Anthony Baldicci, State Section Director out of Oregon, Chris DePerno, our own Chris DePerno, State Director of New York, Richard Renee, State Section Director for Tennessee, and Jesse Peak is on the ERT, the Experiencer Resource Team. Congratulations to all of you. I also want to apologize if I butchered any last names. There were some challenging ones right there. And also, don't forget to go to the MUFON Symposium website and register for the Denver Symposium. And I hope to see you all out there in Denver. And we are going to have a great time. See you there. Congratulations! Woohoo!
Good
Field
video.
investigators are the heart of the week. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So
I love that. I love that you. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go
You
ahead.
said Steve Marriott from the UK. He was like a really famous guitar player. And I know it's not the same one because Steve Marriott is no longer with us, but I just thought that was really cool.
Oh, interesting. I don't know Steve Marriott, so that is cool. All right, maybe he is the guitar player. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Well, no, he's passed on, but yeah.
And
I also wanted to tell you guys, I am finally doing it myself after casually investigating for years and researching, and I was mentoring under Angelia Shear, but I was like, I need to make this official and actually become a certified FI with MUFON. So I'm right there with any of you guys that are studying this. It's kind of a meaty little booklet there, but we can get through this together. The more investigators, the better.
That's right. And I think our guest would agree with that. I think now would be a great time to bring in our guest, Thom Reed. Let me read his bio. The Reed family are the first and only to have their UFO incident officially archived as historically true by the Massachusetts Governor and State Historical Society. The location of Reed's event was added to the state's list of official landmarks and can be seen in the Thom Reed UFO Monument Park in Sheffield, Massachusetts. He's been featured on ABC News in New York, Fox Primetime, and graced the cover of the Boston Globe twice. Thom's incident has been featured on Ancient Aliens, The Taken, Discovery Channel's Alien Mysteries, Travel Channel's Paranormal Declassified, and was the basis for Unsolved Mysteries, Berkshire's UFO on Netflix. Welcome, Thom.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely.
Aboard,
Thank you
Thom.
for being here.
So let me try this. I'm going to go, thank you, Kate and Kate.
Right.
What am I, dog crap?
Yeah, I'm not done
You
yet.
can't say,
No,
say you, Chris?
Just start off with the Kates and Chris. Kates and Chris.
Okay, thanks.
Sounds like a breakfast family.
What an afterthought.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy with the glasses on.
Yeah, well, I got bad eyes. Yeah, I was listening to some of this stuff you were saying. It was hilarious about the feet hanging out, the sphere and stuff. And I was like, Miata, and I'm like, my God, that's hilarious. And I actually saw something like that. What we saw was very similar to that. So I was gonna maybe later on we can circle back around.
Oh, really? That's really interesting. Yeah, I know a lot of our listeners are familiar with your case, but some may not be. So would you like to give us the little short and Cliff Notes version of your incident to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So I used to ride horses. I was on the 4-H club, and we were heading back to our diner that my mom owned and ran. And we were leaving, and she wanted to take a shortcut, through this old bridge that connected a road that we lived on with the main road. And as we came through the back side of it, my grandmother had turned around, and we saw this sphere. Again, it wasn't that big, maybe several size, maybe 2 or 3 times the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, but it was solid like a cue ball on a pool table. And it put off a little bit of a glow. I used to say like a 2-watt bulb, and it rose, and it rose to about two stories or so. And it fired these 2 rods, or maybe I remember a couple of rods of light coming from it, which fired into the water, maybe for, a minute or so. But what was interesting about that is that it retracted back into it, and it didn't fire from the bottom of it. It fired from the sides of it. And my brother actually looked to the right because I was blocking his view. So he was looking around the car trying to find another way to see it. And when he did, he saw another orange one off to the right of the back of the car. And it was a bumpy dirt road. So we were only going about 5, 10, 50 miles an hour max. And I mean, it wasn't really a road. It was a dirt path, really, which became a road. It never really became a real road. It was like for emergency vehicles and horse and buggy back in the day. And it cuts through a cornfield, actually. That's how rural this is. And as we came to a clearing, my mother stopped, and we looked off to the left side of the car. And sure enough, there was a craft that, like a disc, totally different than what we saw prior, hovering maybe 3 stories above the cornfield. And it looked, to me as a child, it looked like a turtle shell because it had lines in it and a pattern to it. And the center of it was much fatter than the top and bottom combined. It was basically, the center. Okay, the ring around the middle of it kind of looked like a snake skin, to be honest with you. It kind of looked like it had patterns to it, and certain parts of it illuminated where other parts of it didn't. And when I talked to Melanie, who's on Unsolved Mysteries, who we become pretty good friends, she had said something to me that I had never mentioned publicly before, which is how one side of it put off like an amber or red tint. And the back side of it, or the left side of it, I guess, didn't put off any light at all. So when people say to me, did it have lights? Well, it put off a light, but it didn't have like floodlights. You know what I mean? It didn't have, lights as you would think. I didn't see any windows. I didn't see any landing gear. And to put this into perspective, there were 3 objects now. And we were basically in the middle of this pyramid of objects. And we felt very funky. Like you were to take your head and shove it under the deep end of a swimming pool, how everything seems, slow and muted. And then there was this like tapping sound, like stones hitting underneath the fender wall of a car if you're driving. And then the car was running. We never shut the car off. The windows were open because it was like 90 degrees. We didn't have AC back in 1969. So there's a breeze coming through the car. It was probably 80 degrees at night. It was hot. And all of a sudden, it was just like the car just engulfed in light. We could see everything in the car. The dashboard. It was like floodlights in the car. And then everything came back to normal for a moment. There was an eruption of crickets and cadias, like an eruption. Like everything became normal again, where you could hear clearly. And then that was the last moment that I remember being in the vehicle, aside from when we were going home several hours later. And I remember being in like a large airplane hangar, if you will, something similar to that. Grabbed sternly by my left arm, taken down a hallway and to what I would say was like an examining room that had a room that, again, Melanie said this, that she remembered like what looked like glass blocks. They used to make walls out of glass block. It had like a wall that bowed inward. It was part circular. All looked like glass, was again lines through it. And I was placed on some type of a table or what have you, or apparatus of some kind that rose up, and another piece, lowered from the ceiling onto me. So they both kind of met in the middle, and that piece separated into 2 pieces, and there were holes in the side that lined up. At one point I ran during this whole thing. I ran into a hallway, which was larger than the inside of like an empty Walmart, or it was huge and much bigger than what I saw. Kind of what, Chris had said earlier about, the object itself looking somewhat small, but then, maybe the inside for whatever reason seems to accompany more. I'm just saying where I was much bigger than what we saw, which makes me wonder, where really was I? Where was our family? Were we actually on the craft itself, or were we somewhere else? And so with our diner being connected to the space race, Sprague Electric, which made the Goodwill message that was sent to the moon 6 weeks earlier, the people that worked on that aided our diner. We had Command Aerospace, Pratt & Whitney, Sikorsky, GE, Electric Boat, Groton Naval Base, Nuclear Submarine Base, all around us. And so back in the day, it was never a question, we saw something. It was simply a matter of what was it. So, that's kind of what happened in 69. There were over 250 witnesses. There were fights in our diner over it, police reports. It went out on a radio station. It was mentioned at the United Nations. By the way, it was mentioned at the UN by someone who used to be the public relations director for MUFON.
So many questions.
I'm trying to think even where to start. First of all, did you see who grabbed you by the arm? Would you describe them as alien or more human looking?
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't really get a clear view. I was actually grabbed by my left arm from behind me and pushed forward. So, and it hurt. I mean, when I was grabbed, it was no like soft grab. It wasn't like, oh, this is a child, be careful. No, it was abrupt and it hurt. And that's why I remember it. It really hurt. And to be honest with you, I from what I remember and what I saw, did not look. What I got the best look at looked like an ant. It looked like an ant. And what little I saw of these other figures, they did look somewhat human. I would say if I had to label it, I would say maybe like a hybrid, smaller human beings, bald or no hair. I don't remember anything that would reference a gray today, like people talk about grays. No, nothing like that. And I do believe I was in a military establishment. I believe that there was a joint venture going on. There was multiple things happening in the area, and I think government was very involved in it.
Okay.
Wow.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, Tom, you're kind of I read a little bit about your biography, and I kind of like you became my hero in a little bit of a way, because I don't know if this UFO event or the abduction event spurred you on, but you started a thing called Miami Models. Dude, one of these days, I got to talk to you about that. That must be awesome. And
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
That's nothing. Actually, I used to work for Omni Penthouse in New York City.
Well, we can't talk about that on the show, but I'll talk to you off the air on that
I'm
one,
not
baby.
going to show you pictures or anything. I'm just
Oh.
saying, yeah, I used to be a stage manager for Club Med too, and I was a stage manager for Northeast Concerts and worked with, John
right,
Kane.
well,
Stuff.
After
That's for
I
another
found
one.
out that, I'll be out every night on the back porch hoping to get abducted so I can get that inspiration. But
Well, this was long before. You know what? Let me tell you something. This does connect.
it
Because when
does?
yes, it does.
Dude,
Because
I'm leaving the station right now. I'm going outside to get abducted, man. Go ahead.
All right. So after all this happened, right, and our family was like, we were basically had to leave town. We did. We moved out of town. But one day my mother said to me, what do you want for a birthday present or Christmas? I can't remember if birthday or Christmas. And I said I wanted a camera, because if I ever had an opportunity to see this again, I wanted to take a picture of it. And that's how I got my first camera. And from that, I became a photographer, or I was a photography, back in school, in high school, in Mount Everett High School in Great Barrington, I was in a photography club. And I took that, and that became my career. If I had never been involved in this, I wouldn't have asked for that camera.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
Did you
I'll
say a
definitely down.
year? What year was this?
This incident was 1969, and
1969.
all three mass sightings back in Sheffield and Great Barrington were all in September.
Oh,
So the book that I was started to write in the 80s was called Sheffield September. But then moving forward in the spheres that Chris was talking about, and so on and so forth, Sheffield had seen those, and they were photographed also in September as late as 2014. So this is something that continually happens there. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't like our family was the only one. Now we
Right.
were the one. See, here's something to think about, right? So when you go to church, right? Or let's say you're very religious for whatever reason. I'm not. But whatever. You could talk about, I'm talking to God, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But that's not something you say in aisle 5 at Walmart, right? Because they're going to have a different perspective on it. So our diner became that, building or spot where you could talk openly about what was happening in the area. And my mom would bring out these big basket of French fries and stuff for everybody, and they'd sit and talk about it, that kind of thing. But this was during the time of the space race. And we were surrounded by manufacturing facilities that were working diligently on things that were going to go to the moon, from capacitors to the goodwill message that was left on the moon by Buzz Aldrin on June 20th. I think it was July 20th, June 20th. And so when we were talking openly about the UFO topic and what was being seen, my mother and family were getting a lot of blowback or pushback or a lot of heat from those people's parents and families or cousins or relatives in the area, because they had other members of the family working on the secret space program, and they thought they could get fired for talking about this type of thing because it was a secret space program. So that's why the fights broke out in our diner. That's why all the paper trail, that's why this became what it was because of our diner openly talking about something that was not supposed to be talked about at the time, because it was during an active time just before the moon launch.
And just to clarify, was this in Sheffield?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so we've got less than 10 minutes to break, but if you would, and I know this might be a little uncomfortable to talk about, so just tell us what you can. But you said that you were on some sort of examination table and some people closed in around you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us some of what you think happened to you there?
Yeah, it's kind of strange. Yeah, and what happened with us and our family, is very different than what a lot of people describe. Which is, I used to be very, focused on, this is what happened to me, so this should have been what happened to you. And I'm starting to realize there's a lot of different activity and a lot of different things happening, from mining to whatever. But I remember when I was along in this thing, there was these two parts that came over my body. One lowered over me, which I thought was to hold me in place, but I could still get out. It wasn't like tight over me. And then this other piece came over it, and there were these holes that lined up, and these hands came through the holes. And they were placed, these things that were placed on my naked body looked like large raisins, and they were like adhered to my skin. And they were like up and down my left side. Everything that took place with me was on my left side. And I felt a bump to my head. I could hear my mom voices. I believe it was my mom. I've said I believe it was her. I know she was yelling for me. I could hear my mom's voices in the background. My grandmother, both of them yelling. My brother had something very similar happen to him. He had a brace on his leg, so he remembered some attention to his brace. He had a club foot. Yeah, I remember something being adhered to my skin that looked like a large black raisin. And there were several of them. And I can tell you that we're also O negative. Most of my family is O negative, Ray negative. My son's AB negative. And this was also during the time of, NOM again, which O negative blood types were tracked by the U.S. government as well. And we were surrounded by government.
RH, right, Bill?
No.
Tom, RH, right?
Yeah, RH negative. O negative.
Right. Yeah.
I'm O negative. O negative is RH negative.
Yeah.
RH negative is across the board, but I'm also O negative, which seems to be, there's some relevance, I think, to what happens. Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but I'll take your word for it and stuff. Hey, I want to take you back to about these creatures. This is kind of fascinating about the ants. Now, you have spoken before and said that some of these creatures may be genetically engineered or manufactured, because you talk about the insect type fever maybe having human characteristics such as hands, or they would stand on 2 feet. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. So I remember certain things because when I was young, I was almost 10 years old. But again, I remember the head of this looking like a football. And it's in Roswell, by the way. Hang on one sec. Don't go away. Hang on. I put this aside for you guys today.
Oh, yeah.
It does look like an ant.
Oh.
And so when I was young, I remember it looking somewhat like a football.
Huh.
Yeah. Wow.
And that is what's in Roswell. This is the backup in case anything ever happens to it.
Holy crap. Look at the teeth on that thing. Bad teeth.
Did you have somebody make that for you?
Actually, a student who went to the same college that I did happened to know someone who maintains the UFO park and decided to do it as a gift for me. And of course, I took care of him, but I had to make a second one as a backup, and the first one went to Roswell. Yeah.
Ooh, wow.
So that's what the head looked like. The body looked very mushroom-like. There were rings around the legs, which reminded me of bamboo. I've lived in Florida most of my life. And every time I see bamboo, it reminds me of the legs, the limbs. But they were wine-colored, almost like a purple ring on the legs.
Tom, where did you get the idea they were manufactured, though? You don't think they could just be a natural species of, alien species?
First of all, I don't say anything. I don't claim anything. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm saying that from my experience and the way the interaction and how cold and how their heads move like a scanning camera, right? I mean, I remember sitting there and looking at both of them, and they were facing a wall, right? I mean, they were like a foot away from a wall, like they were looking at something within this wall, and they were next to each other. And one just turned its head like that. And there was no expression, no anything. And it just seemed so robotic to me, so heartless and empty and expressionless that as a child, they did not seem. It didn't. I've always felt. You got a gut feeling. I go by my gut. I don't know. I don't really know. I didn't dissect the freaking thing.
Did
I
you
don't
see
know.
any humans out there walking around?
I'm sorry?
Some abductees with these creatures have seen humans. Did you see any actual human, maybe military people there?
Whatever grabbed me by the arm was living. There was a human aspect to it. If it was robotic and some type of a droid, it was a damn good one, because that was a living. I believe that to be a human being or a hybrid. But what I saw. The other thing too, to be honest with you, Chris, I was scared, right? So
sure.
I had a different feeling about what really frightened me and what didn't. But I was also going in and out of a state of being nervous, being, almost frightened to death, and then the next minute being completely calm. 1 minute I popped the Xanax, and the next minute I'm like, I'm nervous, right? It's like I was that cut and dry. It wasn't like something slowly came over me. I mean, it was like, bang, I'm fine. All of a sudden, I'm just sitting there and I'm placid. There was another time in 1967 where my mother found me in the driveway with my brother after something had happened at the home off of Boardman Street at our house. And she scooped up my brother, scooped me up, brought us into the house. And I remember that very clearly. I remember her running out and grabbing my brother and taking her in. And I remember standing there until she came out and got me. She couldn't carry us both. My mom was 29 years old.
Yeah, you've had multiple experiences, right?
Yeah, three or four. And that I remember. But to your point, Chris, like that, what happened in 67, that too had a living, feeling type of connection to it. Whereas 69 seemed very different than 67. 69 seemed very cold, orchestrated, almost barbaric.
Wow.
And that's why I say it just felt so cold to me that I don't believe it to have been. Who could have done that to a 9-year-old and not even said a thing to me to calm me verbally?
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on a break here. Was your brother older or younger, just really quick, and then we need to go to break?
Okay, he was younger, about 2.5
brother,
years.
2.5 years. Okay, we will be back with more from Thom Reed. We'll see you in a bit.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
always do the robot when I do that.
Okay, here we
Welcome
go.
back with our guest, Thom Reed. Today I was cleaning the house. I had the disco going. I mean, you got to
Gotcha.
listen to disco when you clean. It's high energy. Anyway, Thom, I had a question. Did you ever have a theory on why September?
You know, that's a Jesus phone. No, actually, there were a couple of things. You know, first of all, there something that happened in the town year after year after year was an event called the Great Barrington Fairgrounds, which used to have all the rides, and it was the second largest racetrack to Saratoga was right in our town. And there's a connection there too, which we can get to back, at the end of the show or what have you. But so there was a lot more people in town in Sheffield there because of the horse racing track, because of the rides, the fairgrounds, the betting, the money that was, the Great Barrington in Sheffield was built on it's no secret, on a crooked horse track. And so maybe that brought in a lot of different people for whatever reason that had an interest in this, that were working alongside some agency that was based in that community. And to tell you, the corn that now grows over that area where this took place is 15 to 17 feet high.
Oh, wow.
Higher than anywhere else. And that's documented. I got pictures of it on my website. I mean, there's corn that's as long as your arm, and that doesn't happen anywhere else. So, but to circle back around to your original question, what is it about September where there's thousands of extra people? First of all, Sheffield is only a community of 3,000 people. It's a small town. And Great Barrington now is a pretty affluent, artsy place. But it's not a big town either. It doesn't even have a mall. But in September, there's so many people in that community or those joining towns that they can't even get parking spots. People pay to park on your yard. So there's thousands of people that are in that town in September, and these events seem to take place in September. So there's got to be a connection between people that are coming in disguised as someone else or coming in, that you normally wouldn't see, or a vehicle that you just go, whatever. You know what I'm trying? I'm trying to
like they're disguising.
Yeah, there's also an underground railroad too that's in Massachusetts, throughout Boston and the area too. So I don't know. The only thing I can think of is that there's people that are hiding amongst all the tourists, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It could be possible.
One of the things, of course, that's bringing people to town is Monument Park. So let's talk about that. First of all, people can show up and have an alien-themed wedding. I understand.
Yeah, you saw that. That was pretty cool, right? Yeah,
which is really
that
cool.
was the first. Yeah, you never forget your first.
Yeah.
I was pretty excited about that because it lightened the mood a little bit. There was a lot of push and shove, a lot of things that were said that weren't true, that were in the papers. That I built the monument somehow. Like I'm going to bring a 5,000-pound monument to some town without permission and just plant it there, and then call ABC News and the Boston Globe and say, "Hey, meet me down here. We're having a party at the unveiling of a monument." I can't believe that anyone would ever believe that. But so what happened with the monument and how this whole thing took place, that there were an awful lot of people in the area that, were, I got to back up for a minute. Okay. I have to explain this. I got to back up. Okay. So, my father was a politician and an attorney. Did you know that?
Yeah.
And he was very good friends with Robert Blechman, who was the public relations director for MUFON back in the 80s. And they were both Democrats, and they were both in the same circles. They both met for dinner. Senator Christopher Dodd came to our house for dinner. I've been to the governor's mansion when my dad was having meetings with Governor O'Neill, and I was sitting in the kitchen having coffee with the cook. So, wasn't allowed to be involved in those, but there was an awful lot of interest, not so much in our case, but in the New York, the sightings in New York, that the Hudson Valley sightings. And at the time, Cash and Landerman was making headlines. So Robert Blechman approached my father to see if he could use our case to advocate and support and add some, because of who he was, that pillar standing he had at the time. They wanted to be able to say, yeah, there's a politician and an attorney who had a very, factually supported case that was also over water, like the Hudson River case in New York. And we'd like to be able to use the Reed's case to support or to add some deeper roots to what is happening in the Hudson. And
I'm
they
gonna
did.
jump in really quickly. I'm so sorry. You actually cut out there for a little while. If we
Okay.
can, I'm not sure exactly what part, guys. Where was he when he cut out? I just want to keep everybody.
Well, I'll just recap really quickly. So our case took place over water. The Hudson River Valley sightings were over water, and Bletchman wanted permission from my father to mention our case in support of the Hudson River sightings.
Okay.
And that was on October 2nd in 1992. And again, Robert Bletchman was the public relations director for MUFON and mentioned it at the United Nations Symposium in support of General Assembly 33426 on October 2nd. He had a meeting with Muhammad Rabinin, who was the president of the Parapsychology Society at the UN. And of course, my father died also on October 2nd. So out of respect for my father for advocating the incident in Sheffield and Great Barrington, the community got together and wanted to pay tribute to him by unveiling a monument in his honor. That's how the monument really came about. It was a tribute to my father.
Gotcha.
Nice.
Wow.
By the way, I think you might have just cut out on my end and not everybody else's, so I apologize if I interrupted there.
Okay.
So, but this is all to do with this UFO park, basically. That
Yeah. So
created.
So because of the support, or in my the support that was gathered for support of my late father, the community passed the hat, $20 here, $40 there, and they built this monument that was put into place under the direction of the Sheffield Select Board, Nadine and Rhonda, and it was moved into place by the Department of Public Works and unveiled live on television. And because of that, so many other people thought, well, I want to, get involved in this. And so before you know it, they were sponsoring flowers and willow trees and solar lights. And then it just blew up. I mean, the family of B.B. King, is sponsoring something this year. Tyrone Vaughn, the nephew of Stevie Ray Vaughan, is a pretty good friend of mine. He's sponsoring a bench. And then, of course, Ben Hansen, Travis Walton, the Travel Channel, Unsolved Mysteries, they all donated benches now. So it's grown into this really cool little, judgment-free park.
Love that.
Thom, I want to take you back to the evidence, because I'm very interested in the evidence, because the evidence kind of brought this to the UN, correct? Because the evidence was pretty overwhelming.
It was the connection to the space race.
Right.
And,
okay. But the evidence, you had a Detective White that was looking at stuff, and they found a very significant high amount of radiation plus strong magnetic fields, which is, it's starting to be a little more common. You're starting to hear more about, magnetic fields. You didn't hear it back in the years ago, but somebody was smart enough to check those things. Tell us about the evidence that actually was connected. Law enforcement, there was a law enforcement personnel that actually investigated this, correct?
Yeah, and it's a shame that, Unsolved Mysteries didn't point more of that out, but they did interview Galata. And Galata, who was in the gas station and pointed up to his father, that was the chief of police at the time, who used to eat daily at our diner. He actually went out with Ed Galata from Unsolved Mysteries to look for these crafts that were being called into the radio station that was also documenting all this. So these landings, if you will, of UFO sightings that the police were dispatched to is also logged, and not in Great Barrington, but in Sheffield. And so they went out to look for these landing spots, and a lot of you could see spots in the ground. I mean, I've got some of that on my website too, because and here's something too about the evidence that we're talking about. It didn't just happen in the 60s. The same type of markings are still found 50 years later. They're still happening. But originally, there were markings, impressions in the ground. At the time, they didn't know what to make of them. Now some people say they were crop circles. I don't think they are, because they're in corn. But there were markings. There were ground markings. And there were magnetic anomalies around the vehicle. And there were over 250 witnesses to it. And the radio station broadcast it. And it was rebroadcast in the 80s. And
the actual corn itself actually designed itself in a different shape. It grew into it was round, from what I understand, right? It wasn't like your regular corn cob.
You did your homework.
A round.
Yeah. Yeah,
Must be
so
easier to eat. But I mean, you know,
yeah, corn balls. Yeah.
yeah,
Holidays. Yeah. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Chris. So you're actually familiar with all this part of it. So yeah, so
I
some
do
of the
my homework, Tom.
yeah, apparently you do. So I'm glad because a lot of people don't. So yeah, so the corn itself in some cases grew round, and in other cases just grew extremely large. But nonetheless, whether it's morphed itself or what have you, nonetheless, it's different. It's still to this day different than it should be. This is not normal corn, and there are some markings that nothing grows at all. And there was a college that came down and did some testing, but we weren't allowed to get the results because we weren't the ones who hired them, so they wouldn't reveal those to us. I think Unsolved Mysteries tried to get them too, but they wouldn't reveal it. But yeah, you're right. So there's a lot of evidence within the ground in the area, and what has happened to that ground. Yes.
Yeah, you answered one of my questions. I was going to ask if anything grew in these spots, but I wanted you to maybe touch more on the military connection. Was there unexplained activity going on with ET and military connection, or do you think it was all military? Can you speak about that a little bit?
I can tell you everything I know is. I mean, I'd be more than happy to share it with you. Okay, so again, there were billions of dollars being sunk into the Berkshires, and again, not a lot. I'm not sure you know this, but are you aware that NASA used to be in Massachusetts in the 60s?
Mm-mm.
NASA was only a couple hours from the park. NASA was across the street from MIT.
Oh, wow.
And then again, like I said, you had, now picture this now, right? Sikorsky, General Electric, Command Aerospace, Pratt and Whitney, Electric Boat, Groton Naval Base, General Electric, which was dumping all kinds of toxins into the water too. You had like 7 or 8 government-funded manufacturing facilities working with NASA within an hour of this town. And with billions of dollars being poured into the community that had to do with space travel and getting to the moon and leaving these messages or calling cards for extraterrestrial life. And all those people, not all those people, many of those people ate in our diner and talked about this stuff in our diner. And a lot of things were heard that weren't supposed to be heard. And a lot of things were said that offended other people. My mother used to get followed back to our, the home. When we went to the beach, sometimes, we'd have a car follow us. My mom would put the blinker on to go right and turn left, and the car would follow her anyway. There was a truck that constantly followed her, back to our house. There were fights that broke out in our diner. My mother, listen to what a love story. My mother met my father at the diner because my mother was being harassed by people. And my dad came in from Long Island and was going to the horse track to bet on the horses and saw these people giving my 29-year-old mother a really hard time. One of them jumped up on the table, exposed himself, and said, "You want to see something out of this world, Nancy?" It's one of those things. And so my stepfather, basically grabbed him, pulled him off the table and said, "You want your food for here or do you want it to go? Because if you're going to eat it here, you're going to sit down, apologize, and, shut the hell up." And my mom's like, "My savior," so that's kind of, that's how they met. And so my mom took him back riding, and he came up on the weekends then and kind of kept an eye on the place, became friends with the chief of police, who's Eddie's father on Unsolved Mysteries, and Jan Green, who was also on the show, became a friend of my mom. She ran the Rexall Pharmacy. And here's something else that we talk about, back to Chris's point about evidence, something else they didn't show on Unsolved Mysteries. Remember Jan Green said, "Oh, we never talked about it." Well, Jan Green, they didn't talk about it outside our diner, but our diner was the hub for the talk, which is how eventually they said that our diner had altered the natural progression of the community. Therefore, our case was historically true. That's kind of how the whole thing went. But Jan Green, she actually, when she saw it, she drove all the way back to the radio station and pounded on their door and said, see, Tom J was a ham radio operator, right? They didn't mention this either. And so he heard the police reports about the crabs landing in Sheffield, Massachusetts, making those impressions that Eddie Galata talked about. So he went back to get on back, because the radio used to play a tape, right? Just loop it. So he went back cut into the broadcast and said, "Listen, it's Tom J. We're getting all kinds of report. What are you guys seeing out there? Can somebody call the station? Let us know that the phone numbers are blah, 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 blah." And so Jan Green just went back, bum, bum, bum. "Well, if you just go outside and look out the window, you'd see it yourself, Tom." And so that's how it drove people not to just say, "Oh, I saw a UFO." People didn't know what they were seeing, but they saw something. They actually stopped their cars, turned around, and went back to the radio station, knocked on the door to say, "Look, this is where it is." So it drove people to change their entire day. The radio station wasn't like right there in town, right? You drive, quite a ways to get to the radio station. And that's kind of how the community was affected by all this, And so where did they talk about it? They had to talk about it somewhere. They couldn't talk it about, at their schools, and people were working for all these government agencies, right, on the space race. So the only spot you could talk about it was back in our diner the following morning over coffee.
Were there other things like cattle mutilations going on at the time? Anything like that?
Yes, absolutely. And again, Unsolved Mysteries didn't cover that either. You've heard of, I don't know if you heard of Judge Kevin Titus. He used to know my father too when he was in office. And Kevin was, probably 8 or 9. And he was at the Dean's in Canaan, Connecticut, and witnessed 2 cows being mutilated. And again, you don't hear much about that either, but there were also cattle mutilations on September 1st, 1969. And I think there was a couple later on too, but there were definitely 2 on that same night.
Oh, wow.
Ooh-wee.
Oh, wow. Yeah, wow.
Well, oh my gosh.
Have you seen the spheres? That the one of the spheres, I think it's a picture on my website, looks almost identical to what you showed before I came on the show today.
Ooh, we're going to have to pull that up.
Matter of fact, anyone listening, all you got to do is type in Sheffield crop circles 2012, 13, and 2014, and they'll not only see the crop circles in Sheffield, but I think there's pictures of the spheres that were seen over these crop circles in broad daylight, just like what you just showed.
Wow.
That's amazing. Tom, I tell you, I didn't know you had cattle mutilations out there. I'll have to check that out. I personally think aliens are poor experts on beef because they go after the cow's ass and the tongue and everything and leave the porterhouses and the T-bones and the filet mignons alone. If they don't want it, they ought to call me up. I'll come get them.
Yeah,
anytime they want.
I'm kind of a ribeye person myself, but yeah.
I just don't see where the back of an end of a cow is delicious. But hey, I don't have that thing. But let me ask you.
I'm with you, Chris. I don't look the back end of a cow and go, "Man, it's hot."
Yeah, it doesn't work for me.
All
right. So I got to ask you this because I have never seen a governor do anything in his life that might be subjectful to maybe getting him in trouble. But anyways, so. The Great Barrington Historical Society has formally and officially inducted you in the first off-world UFO case in U.S. history. The Historical Society confirms that the Reed off-world incident is historically true and warrants abductions. Tom, what convinced him to do this? And then what convinced the governor to actually, he gave you a plaque or diploma or something, right? The governor said, "Hey, yeah, let's go do this, man. This is cool."
Yeah. Two of them he gave me.
Yeah. So
okay. So, oh man, this gets in. Yeah, there's Ben. We just shot with him. Just shot I'm not. I can't really mention too much, but yeah, he was just in town and we filmed for something that's going to air probably just before the symposium. He's a good guy, man. He's been a friend of mine for a long time. Big supporter of ours.
Yeah, ask him if he's an FBI agent.
Yeah, I know he is, or used to be. Well, they say he used to be. I don't know. That's who. Anyway, so yeah, Ben actually came to our old diner, the one that made history, and we actually filmed in our old diner that we had in 1969. It's now an Italian restaurant. But okay, so how did this whole thing happen and get inducted? All right, so I get a call from Debbie Oberman, who had, there's more to this too that I didn't mention. Okay. Excuse me. So Jug End Resort was like, Niantic Country Club. This is where like Alice Cooper used to play golf back in the day and everything. Well, it just so happened, and this is the strangest thing, that I believe it was J. Allen Hynek and a few other people. So my God, there's so much, man. So the NORAD towers were also in town, right? The NORAD towers were in Dalton. And so there was a meeting at Jug End, happened to be the same day, right? Weird. And that's where the classification was called in. It got a CE classification from some golfers at Jug End. And some of them just happened to be very active in the UFO, topic at the time, which is rare because a lot of people weren't, right? And they just happened to be at Jug End and made the call where it got its CE1 classification back in the day. And so Debbie Oberman thought, well, geez, it went to the UN. Your father was a politician. It got a classification. The radio station had the archives, your diner, the police reports. And so they asked me if there were any medical records. And I said, yes, we were treated. And I actually have these weird little scoop marks on my body that I got one on one hand and one on the other, almost in the same spot. I don't know if you can see it. So there were all these things that they thought were relevant. And they asked me if I'd take a polygraph test. And I said, yeah, of course I'll take a polygraph test. And they said, well, we're not going to pay for it. So I actually even paid $700 to go to the Department of Defense Polygraph Institute and have my, take a 3-hour.
I would have given you one cheaper than that.
Yeah, it was $700.
$700.
Yeah, it was $700. And it was wrapped up. I had all these tubes coming out of me, all this. It was unbelievable. It was a 3-hour test. And apparently the guy couldn't believe I was passing it. So he kept asking me the same questions over and over and over. And that was Detective, oh my God, you might know better.
Was it Detective White?
No, Detective White was involved in the investigation, but it was another detective who actually gave me the test, the polygraph test itself, the lie detector test. I think his name was James or something. But anyway, I passed it. And once I passed it, the Historical Society was like, we didn't expect you to pass it, I guess. They were pretty shocked I did, right? And I passed it with like a 99.1% because, and this is another reason that people say to me, well, do you think it was this? Do you think it were grays? Do you think, and I keep saying, I'm not going to use certain verbiage. I avoid stuff like that because what if I take a polygraph or test again? How good, what good am I if I start taking leaps and I start taking, maybe assumptions. And then they ask me, oh, well, did you ever exaggerate or something? I could fail a polygraph test. So I just stick to what I know. I don't make assumptions. I'll give you the information. Do what you want with it. You believe it? Great. You don't? I don't care.
Yeah.
But
Jim Morris gave you the polygraph test.
Yes, Jim Morris.
Yeah.
So I just lay it out there, and I'm not going to label anything. And for that reason, I'm being as gut honest as I can be. There's nothing inside. Like if I were to take do hypnosis or something and I got confused, did this really happen? Do I really believe this happened? Could have been planted thoughts. Then bang, I don't really know the truth anymore. Right now, I know the truth as I see it, as I've lived it my entire life. It is what it is. And so for that, this is where I sat with the, the Historical Society. And I said, I'm not going to exaggerate. I'm not going to say anything stupid. I'm going to lay it out there. I'm going to be honest with my retelling of it. It's up to you guys to make your decision. And so I had to sign this thing saying that I wouldn't use certain terms because if they were going to accept this and do something with it and run with it and do something so pioneering, they didn't want to end up getting fired over it either. Everything seems to be about money and losing their jobs and stuff like that. I'm like, no, I'm not, whatever you guys want to do. And so I went to a census and they go, don't Reed promised that he's going to be responsible in his retelling. And I am, I do my best. I keep it grounded. I keep it factual. And I don't take, yes, I've jumped into this topic with 2 feet, but at the same time, I'm responsible on how I handle it,
No, I
And
think
so-
that's very wise of you.
Yeah, that's good.
And so for that, it went to a vote and they're like, yep. So the questions came out as whether this would whether the evidence itself would warrant, if it went to court, have other people been sentenced, to life in prison with less evidence? So we had polygraph tests, witnesses, doctors' reports, detectives who looked into this thing. So yes, it would hold up in court. And then the second question was, did our incident, was it profound enough that it altered the natural progression of an entire community? And if it did, like Billy the Kid altered the railroad, then it was historically true, because we changed history. We changed the natural progression of an entire county. So therefore, the event as a whole was true. Now, there were a lot of things that came up later on, which was nonsense. And let's focus on Unsolved Mysteries for a minute. Unsolved Mysteries interviewed the Great Barrington Police Department. Remember the guy opens up I think the jury's still out. It didn't happen in that town. You ever think of that? How many people watch that program and know that the incident took place in Sheffield, and Unsolved Mysteries interviews a cop from another town?
Probably got the cheapest guy they could find. I don't know.
And so he's like, no, nothing happened. We don't have anything here. It didn't happen in that town. Now, there were sightings in that town. There were sightings in Pittsfield. There were sightings in Lenox, Lee, Stockbridge, Great Barrington, Sheffield, and Canaan, and Ashley Falls, New Marlboro, Egremont, right? But it didn't happen there. The police weren't dispatched there. It happened in Sheffield. So Unsolved Mysteries goes on, with this little, I don't know what they did. And they asked this other officer, well, so do you have a report from September 1st, 1969? Nope. And they throw that into the program. Why would you do that? Why would you remove all the evidence? Why would you not show the citation from not one, but two from Governor Charles D. Baker, not show the reports from the Historical Society, not show medical records, not show who my father was, not show the documentation that this went before the United Nations, for God's sakes, and that my father died on the same day? You take all that out of Unsolved Mysteries, interview a cop from a town where it didn't happen, and throw in some guy with long hair?
Do you think they're intentionally trying to cover something up?
I don't think that was covering up. I think that they just didn't, for whatever reason,
It's TV. It's entertainment. I mean, unfortunately, it does happen. But hey, Thom, before we go any further, we ran a Facebook poll, and we had some viewers on our Facebook page, MUFON WhatsApp Facebook page. We asked them some questions, and one that they really wanted to ask you was if you felt like this could be generational, your contact.
Oh, absolutely. My mother, I believe this is generational. My mother had her first sighting in 1954, and she was with her brother, who was going to an early college in Maine. And it happened again in 66. It happened again in 67. It happened in 69. My brother and I both had an experience around 2009 when his son was turning 6. And my son has scored off the charts. He beat an unbeaten chess pro in Palm Beach County when he was in 4th grade. He represented the entire city of Boynton Beach in math. He was able to do new formulas and things that people haven't even thought of. He is in the Superior Range. He was a member of People to People twice in Washington, D.C. And he's absolutely brilliant. He's got like 170 IQ. And if I like to think I'm fairly intelligent, but I'm like, 130, 140, right, for an IQ. And if he knew his mother, he didn't get it from her. So, I don't know.
You're a man of my heart.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, everybody's got their, good points and bad points. Anyway, she was a good looking woman, though. Anyway, so, where'd he get it from, right? And the other thing, too, that, we are all, 9 of us in our family, 9 of us are Rh negative, 9 in our family, and O negative. And so, I've got, the records of my son's abilities and his tests from the Miami Children's Hospital. And he, listen to this. Here you go. So twice now, my son's actually had experiences too. He doesn't talk about it much because, whatever, he's got more important things to worry about right now. And we live in Tennessee, and it's like the godforsaken Bible Belt, right? So you got to really watch what you say. So anyway, so he actually was tested twice now for forms of remote viewing. And he actually scored higher than coincidental chance twice at separate testing facilities that specialized in remote viewing.
Wow.
And we're not talking like, somebody's house. We're talking about big testing centers, certified testing centers. And I've got those letters too. And they all went to the, to Production for Unsolved and many others. And no one's ever mentioned that either. So yes, I do
That
believe
actually, yeah.
generational. Yeah.
That actually ties really nicely into the question I had for you next, which I don't know if you've read Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, but you know, I know experiencers oftentimes have other paranormal events or what they call hitchhiker phenomenons to these kind of abductions or events. Has that happened to you or any of your family members?
Well,
Orbs, shadow
well, but
figures, anything like that?
okay. So, all right, here we go again. This is something that I have had happen to me my entire life. I see shadows in the house. I hear footsteps. Steve Pierce was actually at my house for a month, and he was so freaked out over things, he actually left. You can ask him. I mean, there were knocks on the door, nobody there. We're in the basement, which is like a finished basement. You hear footsteps. I mean, just you can feel the weight on the floor, and you run upstairs. There's nobody here, and the doors are locked. You know, my girlfriend and I were hanging out upstairs. We heard someone coming up the stairs. You know, we were like, we got to get dressed, whatever. You know, cover ourselves up and shut the door, and there's nobody in the house. You know, it's that powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is going to sound nuts, right? So one day I'm walking down through the, one of those, yeah, God, all these weird collectibles that are sent in from all over the country. And I see this, dog, right? Just like the, an Egyptian freaking dog. And I'm like drawn to it for some reason. Right. And, so I bought it, put it in the house, and I haven't had activity since. And it's the strangest thing because it was it was like all the time. And, so it was like the best $2,000 I ever spent. But at the same time, I've had this happen my whole life. I mean, after we left Sheffield and my dad wanted to run for office, and it was right around the time that this death took place, this murder in Canaan. It was called The Death in Canaan. You can Google it. Barbara Gibbons, the trial of what was his name? Can't remember it. But it's I think Brian Dennehy played one of the fathers, and it was a pretty big movie. A Death in Canaan. Peter Riley, the trial of Peter Riley. And so my father finds this house, barn, cottage thing, going up for sale for like 60 cents on the dollar. So he buys it. So next thing I know, we're living in this house with a cottage where this brutal murder took place. The Warrens came down there, Ed and Lorraine. They met me in the driveway. They wouldn't go in. They weren't hired to investigate it that day, but they were like, oh my God, there's something terrible here. And it was so powerful to me that I couldn't go I couldn't go inside the building. I'd go in once or twice and feel sick. I couldn't do it. So our whole family became very sensitive after this event in '69. And we really realized it when we went into that, old post office where the murder took place. It was a rented building, but it started out as an 1800s post office. And we couldn't even, we tore it down, planted a rose garden over it so that hopefully it should have some peace. But it was that we became so sensitive after this, and it's continued through our whole lives.
Thom, you kind of make me think about something here that's kind of interesting, and I want to talk to you about disclosure, because your case has been noted by the Historical Society. Governors have recognized this case. You had this case to the UN. It's been all over television, but yet we can't crack the disclosure thing, especially in the area where you are, where you had gazillion aerospace engineers, doing all kinds of things. So let me ask you, about disclosure. You're in the UFO field now, really heavy. What do you think about disclosure? When is it going to come? How is it going to come? What's your opinion of this?
Well, first of all, I don't think anyone's ever going to tell us anything that we're not, they don't want us to know. I mean, everybody, let's look at COVID, right? COVID's, it's kind of like that magician, right? Like we're going to keep everybody looking over here while everything's going on over here and they forget about it. If we get any type of disclosure, it's not going to come from NASA, who's backed by the U.S. government. Government's going to tell us anything. We still don't even know if Obama had a birth certificate, for God's sakes, and they're going to tell us. Come on. Anybody who thinks the government's going to tell us anything, look, let me ask you guys, all right? Do you trust the government? Do you anything? Do you trust the government?
Well, we're not watching the State of the Union tonight.
Okay, so why does everyone want why? So why does everybody want the government to tell us something? It's stupid. The government's never been honest with us from day one, right? So why would they be now? You know where the disclosure is going to come from is like Elon Musk, the privately funded space programs, those that are going to start to disclose things before those with government backing that are going to be limited to what they can say because they'll lose their money next year.
But Tom, Bigelow's already tried to do that.
Bigelow's private, yeah.
Yeah, but Bigelow, but he's done exactly what you said, but it went underground again. You know, he was on 60 Minutes, and that should have went bingo, bango all over the place.
Yeah, because
and it was like, okay, what ball game is
right,
on?
because the U.S. government owns the networks, and they don't want it talked about. That's exactly why the government isn't going to release anything, because anytime someone else says something, they crush it anyway. So why would people go, oh, the government's going to tell us? The government's not going to tell us. They don't even let Bigelow tell anybody. However, when Elon Musk and the rest of them have some evidence and they get it out there and they buy some TV time, yeah, that's how it's going to come out. Now, Bigelow should have followed up. I would thought he would have bought some ad in the New York Times or done something to follow up with that. He got on 60 Minutes. That was big. Yeah. But it's not going to come from NASA. It's not going to come from our government. Maybe the drippy faucet thing, just a little bit here, a little bit there. You know, anything that we found out has been leaked, right? It's been leaked.
I mean, Bigelow actually said there's ET walking among us. What do you think of that, Tom?
He said they're right below our feet. That was a quote from him. They're right below our feet. And they probably are.
Inner Earth thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Underwater or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm jumping around a little bit here, but something that struck me is when you
all over the place.
When you were on the craft, if we can go back to
Oh, I never said I was on the craft in '69.
well, that's true. You didn't say it, crap. You said you were somewhere. You were on some sort of
and it was bigger than the craft. That's why I get confused. It was bigger. It was much bigger.
Yeah, much bigger. So they put these. Okay, first of all, you said you had no clothes on when you ended up back in the car because you all just ended up back at the car.
I had
right?
clothes on. I had clothes on back in the car. Yeah.
Okay, so they got you dressed again. When they put those things on your skin, the things that look like dark raisins. Do you remember any pain? Did it feel like anything was being drawn out, or energy going into you? Do you have any recollection of that?
I really don't. I just remember the holes that were lining up and the hands came through it. I guess because that was kind of freaky to me, you know, like, what are you going to touch? What are you doing? It was like almost, you know, it was kind of weird, kind of uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of awake at that point. I mean, I remember it well. And so I remember that there were multiple, they adhered to my skin. They stayed on the side of my leg. So there was like one, like between my my knee and my foot, my ankle, and one on my thigh, maybe two on my thigh, one above my knee, one above. I don't remember them being on the side of my stomach, like or rib cage, mostly on my leg area. And at that point, not long after, I went back out, and I remember being back in that large open area. Now, something else I didn't tell you too, when I first got into that large area before this even took place, I actually had slid off somewhere I was ever sitting or sleeping or laying onto the floor. And it was when I got on the floor that I noticed these like single individual lights where the ceiling met the top of the building I was in, what would be a roof, I guess. And it reminded me of single fluorescent tubes. Now it does, not then. We didn't, you know, just saying now, that's just kind of what it reminded me of, like a light of space, a light of space. And that's when I was like, you know, just like that, right on my left arm. And so again, it seemed very, you know, looking back and reflecting, it reminded me more of you know, something very mundane. It wasn't like super high tech, right? And so I really do think that this was to answer your question, my body absorbed something or it extracted something.
Okay. And do you remember what the hands look like? Did they look human?
Yep. I didn't notice anything different. And again, they just, you know, if I were to say one, it reminded me more of like a, you know, like an Asian type of Oriental type of person that was bald. I don't remember huge eyes. I remember a small person that was bald, thin, very tiny, but strong. And okay. I don't believe, it's hard for me to really label it because I don't know, but whatever I saw did not strike me as someone I would normally see in town. You know what I mean?
So
Right.
There were these ant-like beings, but you didn't see necessarily these ant kind of hands coming through. I'm wondering, it sounds very...
No, they were off to the left side of this. There was like a dome thing of glass, and they stood on the left side. There was an opening on the right where I actually ran out. Yeah, they stayed on the left side, and the beads that were around me to put those things were the same type of, like, I would say a hybrid type of individual that, like, I saw that grabbed me on the arm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got I'm getting the impression that you feel like our military is actively working alongside these beings. So it was like a joint kind of.
There's no question.
No question about it.
I'm 99% sure that what we experienced was a joint venture.
Okay. And so what do you think the end game is? What were they taking from you? What are they trying to accomplish? And do you think this is like DARPA kind of activity, my lab? What,
There's a couple of, okay, first of all, this wasn't a one-time thing. So, some people say to me, do you think you were singled out? And I used to say no, because it happened so frequently, but nothing really happened to this level to other people. A lot of people saw things. For the longest time, I used to think that, we were experimenting on something that we found, or we didn't really know how to operate it. And they thought, because of all the lights from the fairgrounds and the Ferris wheels and everything, that if there was another light in the sky, it would have blended in with the huge fair that was going on, which is why it happened in September, because of the fairgrounds, all the people, a lot of lights, distractions, that if you were going to fly something, experiment with something, the best time to do it is when the sky's lit up with floodlights and all the kinds of, the lights from fairgrounds, right? It gets lost and all that. And I think there's some truth to that. So I used to think, well, maybe, they were testing it, and something happened and it became too visible. Maybe they lost control of it. But then that doesn't really make sense with the two spheres that just happened to look like they were testing water, right? So because they seem to be all working together in conjunction with the craft, like these, because they actually had left, hovered over water, and then they went back towards the craft as our car did. So they were this was working in unit. That was all working in unison. So if there was something went awry, then this all wouldn't have happened so smoothly. So that kind of shoots that. And I thought, well, we're all O negative, tracked by the government. Government's everywhere. Is it something genetic with us? Is it something that goes back to my mother, her experience in 1954? And I say to myself, well, if I jump on that bandwagon, then it's like, oh, you guys are special. What is it about you guys? I don't know. Then I say, well, if it's random, completely random, then why hasn't it happened to someone else? So I don't really know where to start with all this. I would say that, maybe we were on the wrong. If it was just being at the wrong part of the, wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time, depending on how you look at it, because I think we experienced something phenomenal. I love what I saw. I'm proud to have, I feel good and privileged to have seen that firsthand, and to be part of that, because it wasn't the off-world experience that really messed up our lives. It was the way people treated us afterwards. It was the on-world experience that screwed up our family, not the off-world. I'm like, still to this day, like, I can't believe I was part of that. But I also say to myself, I can't believe our friends turned on us like they did. So that's the painful part.
Tom, maybe they were scared. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on that. I have a two-part question for you. One, did any people come up and say, Tom, off the record, I had the same experience. I had problems in that area, and things happened to me, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to go out public with it. I mean, you're pretty brave to put this.
Oh no, that happened all the time. I mean, my mother's diner. Well, maybe just to get an answer really quickly. Yeah, people drew what they saw and taped it on the chalkboard in school.
Yeah.
I mean, our entire chalkboard was filled with drawings from kids. But what my mom did, because you could see a change in people. Our town was truly divided. You had a lot of kids that were just started to act differently. Melanie from Unsolved Mysteries used to eat at our diner. She'd come in with her boyfriend, she used to get like these grilled cheese sandwiches with onion, whatever. And she would leave with her friend at the time. And so she didn't really eat in a restaurant a lot, but she came to it. But my mother used to store all these bikes for people. You know, back in the day, everyone rode those banana seat bikes. And so my mother would keep them in the diner. And so the kids could all, you know, we used to run a tab for them. They could have breakfast and all ride to school together on their little bikes. And afterwards, you know, the parents were the ones that really, you know, started to get difficult. But there was this table of four. My mother used to refer to this table of four, these obnoxious people that would come in and, you know, to get their kids, you know, because they'd eat after it all. Okay, so the school bus didn't go to everyone's house. We used to all meet at the diner to drop them off, they'd eat, and the parents would pick them up at our diner and take them home because the dads were farmers and up real early, you know. And so the entire community basically lived in our diner. And so my mother saw differences in people, you know, noticed a change in personalities. And
were they scared, Thom?
Well, yeah, these kids started to, you know, kind of group together that weren't normally friends. And so my mom would like bake these, you know, her just kind of French fries. She'd like deep fry them in bacon fat. And they were pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
And we had a jukebox. We had like a 1960s Wurlitzer jukebox. So we lived in a town without a radio station, really, that was more than a news station. And so if you wanted to listen to rock and roll, the Stones or whatever back in the day, you came in our diner, you dropped it a quarter. And so my mom would give the kids a bunch of change for the jukebox and these big baskets of fries dipped or fried in bacon fat, and sit there and let them talk amongst themselves and say, you could tell me anything. You know, she was like a surrogate mother to these kids. And so you saw this division. Then you saw those old, you know, the old school kind of kids, you know, that, you know, farmers' kids, tattoos, you know, suspenders, you know, poor dental hygiene, you know, the ones that started the fights and all the ruckus. And so, you know, there was this, you could see it, you know, there's a clear divide between those who saw something, were part of something, knew it, had no one to talk to except their other friends. And that's kind of how our diner became like what I think is what launched the park, you know, which is a non-judgmental spot. Look, if you saw something, you experienced something, you can say whatever you want in here.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah. And so there was a divide. And it's those kids today, a lot of them are the ones who went to the state and testified on behalf of our family. Some of those kids and those testimonies were those kids that my mom gave those French fries to in 1969.
Now, my part two of my question, and then I'll shut up, is I know you probably had your phones tapped and you had all people following you and everything, but has anybody ever walked up to you and say, Thom, shut your mouth?
Well,
I mean, not a person from the diner. I'm talking about somebody that might have been from the government.
Oh.
Or somebody just walked up and say, Thom, you're talking too much.
Worse than
Shut your
that.
mouth.
Well, my father's not here for one, so he was told to shut up, and I guess he didn't. So I had one day, I've had two experiences. One was an FBI agent. I actually worked on the Sarah Palin email hacker from UT. He was at my house. And then one day I was actually, this is crazy, right? My son was in a hot tub. I'm hanging out doing laundry. I get a knock on the door. And this guy, I open the door, and he shows a badge in my face. He was from Key Point Government Solutions. There's articles about this guy, a couple of them. One was in the Indianapolis Monthly Magazine. It's like an 8-page article about it. So I'm like, well, you know, what can I help you? And he was from Colorado, believe it or not. Key Point Government Solutions is based in Colorado. I still got his card. I'll show it to you when I come to the symposium. So he sits me down on my front steps. And I'm like, where's your car? He goes, well, I'll be asking the questions, and pulled out a metal, where you have the 8x10 letters, government, state letters. And he starts reading off all this stuff. Did your father, still own this property before he passed? Do you travel internationally? Are you savvy with computers? All these questions. And it went on for like 20 minutes. And then afterwards, he gave me a card, told me to flip it over and read the Privacy Act of 1974 out loud and raise my hand and swear never to mention this happened. And so I'm like, oh, whatever. And so he left. Another time I was with Attorney Kessler's wife and her black Lexus heading to the department, heading to the district attorney's office. And we were run off the road into oncoming traffic, and we got his plate number and reported it to 3 police officers at a burger place, and went to court. And he testified that he was hired to harass us as a private investigator. It wouldn't reveal why or who. Of course, he said that my attorney's wife overreacted, but he said that he was hired to give us a hard time. Another time, someone broke in our house, and my son chased him down the road on an ATV. So we've had, things happen to us that don't happen to other people. I also had several credit cards all canceled on the same month per my request. Yeah, like I'm going to cancel, my credit cards. I don't need 10,000 in credit. Yeah, I have no idea why that would happen. And so I called up and tried to get them reissued, of course, and got them back eventually. But so we had the FBI agent come in our house, Key Point Government Solutions. I'll bring the police reports too. Settler, I think, was his name, who ran us off the road. And then, Adam, whatever his name was, from Key Point Government Solutions. So there's been 3 or 4 incidents where, and then of course my father's passing, which, by the way, my dad was 54 years old and perfectly healthy.
That's sad. Yeah, sorry you lost your dad. Especially when it's a mystery like that, like you question. Yeah.
Well, the CDC came in from Atlanta and investigated his building, and it's been shut down to this day. No one's been allowed back in it. And my mom was paid $25,000 not to pursue anything. So who knows?
Wow.
But anyway, on the lighter side, so there. I don't think that back in the 80s and 90s, there was I think it's different now, even though there's not really true disclosure like Chris was kind of alluding to. When are we going to get that? I think that things are definitely different now than they were even 30 years ago. So, and my father had a voice. My father was a politician. He was a mayor. He was very good friends with senators and governors. And if he wanted to get something in the press, all he had to do was pick up the phone. I owned a small business. I'm not who he was. So even though I got hassled a little bit, my dad got pressured a lot. He used to go to an Irish pub, and he would get, he was talking about the book and releasing the information that he got back from certain people. And I don't think that helped, because he made a promise to my mom that when time was right, he was going to do something with this information. I think he was around that time. He thought, well, now might be the right time to do it. So he had other things going on too at the same time that he agreed to work with Robert Blechman, from MUFON at the UN. That wasn't, but that might have been the final straw. Like, okay, we've asked you not to say anything, and he knew a lot. Like my father said that to me, like what happened with your family or our family was much closer to home than you realize. That was a quote from him. One of the last things he said to me before he died.
Wow. Okay, we've only got a few minutes left. We had a really good question come in from one of our viewers, Kathleen Hager. Did you smell anything when you were taken, and how many ETs have you seen?
Okay, so did I smell anything? No, but I felt a lot. There was a pressure change. There was we've been in the middle of hurricanes more than once, and there's that dead feel, like nothing. Kind of like someone just takes a switch and turns it off on life itself, and it's almost like surreal and muted, but then certain sounds seem very amplified, like being underwater. That was very, and here's the thing too, people would say, oh, you seem like muted, or you seem like placid, but yet inside your mind isn't. It's only your body. So that's something we've all experienced. And as far as, what's part 2 of the question? Oh,
how many beings have you seen?
I would say that 2. I mean, I think that what we saw that looked very human was a hybrid. I'm going to say it was a hybrid.
Yeah.
Because inside, I believe that. I don't know, because, again, I was 9 or 10 years old, but my mom still saw it, and she was older, and we all kind of collectively said, yeah, it wasn't human. And then, of course, what looked like an ant, obviously, was that a being? Was that real? I don't know. today I go and I look at all the, the robots and everything that's being done now, and it looks so real. I'm thinking, well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe that's why it seemed so cold, and maybe why there was no affection or anything.
Yeah,
But
possibly AI.
it's an assumption. Yeah, it's still an assumption. Yeah.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left, and I just wanted to let our listeners know that you will be one of our speakers at the symposium this year. So I'm so excited to see your presentation, to learn more about that. Yeah,
you.
and where's a great place, people, website, or is there anything where people can
Yeah.
learn more about
So
you?
what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring all the documentation that I talked about tonight and everything that we have, everything that was not shown on Unsolved Mysteries. And then I'm going to show some clips of Unsolved and a couple other shows that we've been on, what was accurate and what wasn't, so I think that's how I'm going to approach Unsolved. I'm going to give them a little taste of their own medicine. a little tit for tat. No hard feelings. I think they showed the flight path and everything, and I think that was cool. They did a good job with that, and the production was great. I mean, the people we worked with were terrific.
Right.
As far as a site to see, some of this documentation is online. You can go to ufopark.org, ufopark.org. Yep, there it is. And just go to docs. You'll see a lot of it there. Obviously, there's more, but that should give you a taste. And I look forward to coming. I know I still got to get you guys some information.
Yeah.
I'm in swamp. My house is under construction. Did you know my house flooded a year ago?
Oh no!
No.
We look forward to hanging out with you at the symposium.
Yeah, I'm going to bring my limo. I think I'm going to be at
Oh,
Roswell. Yeah, I'm going to be at Roswell the 4th of July weekend. So I think I'm going to drive from there.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
we will
and I'll
see you
take.
there.
I'll go out in the limo later that night, and
Sounds like
yeah,
a
well,
plan.
whatever. If you guys got time, we'll take the limo out. But I'm
Sounds
going to bring the docs. I'm going to blow the roof off the place. I'm going to expose a lot that I haven't said before. If there's one place I'm going to do it, it might as well be there. So,
you buying dinner?
Awesome.
No, I'm not buying dinner.
Next week, really quick.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom, for being our
Burger
guest.
King.
Next week, we have Lynn Katai, Dr. Lynn Katai, 25th anniversary of the Phoenix Lights. She is super busy, so we are going to have to pre-record for next week's show. If you have any questions for Dr. Lynn Katai, please put them on our MUFON WhatsApp Facebook, and we will make sure we ask Lynn. You guys have a great rest of your week. Thank you to Katie Cook. Thank you, Chris DiPerno. Thank you, Thom Reed. And thank you to our producer, Bill Skywatcher, and our co-producer, Amanda Curran. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, guys. Thank you.
Good night.